Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Rajiv Kamal Kumar from AN Sinha Institute of Social Studies, Patna. Today we will discuss the module on tribes in India, antiquity, historical, academic, administrative and anthropological importance from the paper Travel Culture of India. So students, let us see what we are going to learn from this module. At the end of this module, you would able to define an exclusive social and a structural account of the tribal people in India. You would able to understand the course of historical development of tribals, their academic and anthropological importance in terms of tribal studies. You would all able to define the significance of the tribal administration in the development of tribal areas. You would also able to understand the strategies of the tribal development taken up by the government. Tribal people forms a major section of the world population. They are found all over the world. They are called by different names such as primitive, tribal, indigenous, aboriginal, native, and so on. In India, they are also called as Adivasi. India has a large number of tribal population. Prior to the caste system, people were divided into different small tribes. At that time, each tribe was a homogeneous and self-contained unit without any hierarchical discrimination. Each tribe had a chief for its protection. Gradually, the chief assumed political and military power and was recognized as the ruler of their group. Thus, there emerged the republics and monarchies. Tribes were associated with large kingdoms. Each tribe had its own system of administration. So, before independence, the tribals were divided into different small groups who were largely isolated, and the Britishers had the policy of isolating them for the convenience of their administration. Uh, After the independence, this was changed. There was decentralization of authority among the tribes. The traditional tribal institutions were vested with legislative, judicial, and executive powers. India is one of the few nations of tribal concentration and is also having the largest tribal population. During this period, there were very small groups of people scattered throughout the country in different spots. The tribal culture blooms in the isolated highlands and forests of India. The tribals are an integral part of the Indian society. Tribals are tied up with the hands, land, and forests and characterized by their own language and heritage, love for freedom, and self identity. Tribals are the centers of self sufficiency and embodiment of collectivism. Though tribal society is still rooted in age old customs, but the process of change has already been taking place. There are several factors of changes, and one of the most important factors is modernization of the society. The effective participative institution provides the basis of redistribution and egalitarianism, which is the feature of a tribal society. The tribal culture of India is molding itself slowly but steadily to find its niche in the national mainstream of culture. Tribes have a long and rich cultural past. Their history goes back to the prehistoric ages. Unfortunately, because they lack a written tradition, it is difficult for historians and anthropologists to chronicle their past. It is said that even the subsequent history of the travels up to the Aryan invasion is shrouded in mystery. The aborigines of India do not form a uniform race. They come from various regions of Asia and they belong to various races, as mentioned previously. Knowledge about the origin and subsequent history of the numerous tribes is vague. However, However, their story of glory and decline can be reconstructed. The invention of a script and the commencement of written records in this period. In this regard, some scholars believe that builders of the Indus Valley civilization might have been the Aboriginal people, meaning the residents of Indus Valley civilizations were also tribals. The ancient scriptures of the Vedic period contains some references in this regard. In the latter Vedic period, that is from 1000 to 600 BC, the fusion of the Aryan and the non-Aryan continued. During the feudal period between 400 to 1000 AD, the tribal areas were invaded by the non-tribals, and these non-tribal invaders were mainly came from the northwestern part of the country. Apart from the Mughals, the other groups who disturbed the tribal regions were the Persians, the Greeks, the Sakas, the Huns, and other hordes of nomadic invaders. Uh, Most of these invaders were have invaded the tribal country from northwestern side of the country, and these were uh, these have come before the Mughals. From the foregoing account, it seems safe to infer that tribal history is marked by struggle and subjugation by outsiders. The anthropological concerns in tribal study. The study of tribal has been one of the main concerns of anthropologists as they take cognizance of the tribal tradition and their way of life. In fact, the genesis of anthropology can be traced to the attempts made by the colonial rulers, administrators, ethnographers, and missionary workers. These forest and hill dwelling savages were called tribes to differentiate them from other civilized populations of the country. The colorful mosaic of tribal culture with their exotic customs and rituals, apparel and adornment, songs and dance, their folk culture will continue to attract the scholars of various disciplines, particularly the discipline of anthropology. Tribal studies is, though not an exclusive domain of anthropologists alone, as any development work should be done through multidisciplinary approach. Nevertheless, the anthropologists play greater role in this context, as the anthropologist has the distinct tradition of fieldwork. The rigorous training in the field enables anthropologists to be more familiar with the tribal and rural environment than others. An anthropologist collects data through participant observation method. Thus, an anthropologist not only have more experience of tribal life, but also he is in a better position to suggest solution for them. The anthropologists mainly rely upon the qualitative methods of data collection, which includes participants' observation, in-depth interview, case study, genealogy, focus group discussion, and other such techniques. It was during the colonial period that the tribal were studied by the scholars, ethnographers, administrators, and anthropologists who provided classified information about the travel and their life. A series of definitions have also been offered by the earlier anthropologists such as Morgan, E.V. Tyler, Rivers, and other anthropologists, but none of the anthropologists have reached on the consensus of definition of tribes. As early in 1936, E. E. Evans Pritchard studied the problems of travel and suggested the British government to how it could consolidate its colonial rule without facing any resistance from the native people, that is, the original inhabitants of India, that is, tribal people. Professor Soltex has introduced a new term, which action anthropology, in which the entire financial and administrative powers are granted to anthropologists for tribal development. Earlier, the role of an applied anthropologist was merely that of an advisor, but after the intervention of Professor Soltax and the term, the coining of the term action anthropology and related work, the intervention of anthropologists were greatly acknowledged. Having been inspired by the work of Professor Soltax, some of the Indian anthropologists like Professor L.P. Vidyarthi and Professor P.K. Vaumik have also taken up action research in India. Professor L.P. Vidyarthi, in his book Applied Anthropology in India, suggested that an anthropologist is not merely a social doctor who diagnoses the evils of society, but he is also a social engineer who could successfully reconstruct a healthy society. The assertion of Professor Vidyarthi is based upon mainly two exclusive characteristics. The first characteristic is the anthropologist studies a social phenomena with scientific objectivity. That is, there is no biasness in studying the society. And the second, the anthropologist maintains cultural relativism, meaning while studying the society, the anthropologist does not have any bias or idea beforehand. So, the anthropologists take up the study of society with focused objective. The advent of industrial revolution and consequent urban exploitation, particularly in the tribal belt of Middle India, makes the situation more complicated. In historical times, it were the British rulers who, for the first time, extended the arms of government most seriously to the inaccessible hilly region which were consigned to the oblivion. The tribal administration can be studied in two phases. These can be divided before independence and after independence. So, the tribal were ruled by the colonial ruler before independence, and their policy was also altogether different. For the sake of convenience of their administration, the tribal were not integrated into mainstream society. The Britishers think that if they will make changes into their society or they will intrude into tribal society, it will do more harm to the administration, to the colonial rule. So they did not do anything during the British India. But after the independence, the planned changes were taken up by the government of India, and these changes were mainly in the form of different development programs and schemes. the Government of India has introduced several safeguard measures for the marginalized section of the society, including the tribal population of the country. The British policies of tribal administration were framed to isolate tribals from the mainstream of tribal national life. In the year 1774, under the provision of Regulating Act 1773, special tasks were started for bringing transformation in socio-cultural life of the tribals. But later on, the British rulers realized that intervening the tribal areas is not beneficial for them. In 1833, Lord William Bentinck regarded tribal areas to be guided by their own primitive laws under the Governor General Council. To this, several nationalist leaders at that time also objected that the British people are not interested in developing the original inhabitants of India. That is, the British rulers deliberately keeping the tribals isolated from the development programs and schemes, and they do not want to provide any modern education to the residents of India, particularly the tribal people. The Christian missionaries also came in with the patronage of the government. They spread Christianity among tribal people and helped them with health care and education. After the Sipai Mutiny in 1857, Christianity got official patronage and spread speedily among the tribal. So the missionaries, Christian missionaries, have helped the Indian tribal population immensely, but they have their own agenda of promoting their religion, their faith, and converting the local tribal population into Christian religion or Christianity. The national leaders were anxious to reintegrate the tribal society with national life. They protested against the British policy of isolation. Later on, Thakkar Bappa, Dalton, Risley, Gregson, Hudson, Professor S.C. Roy, Professor V.S. Gua, Dr. Warrior Alvin, and missionaries like Wood, Mishap, Nostril, and our leaders adopted better administrative policies for tribal development in India. Planned changes in Free India. The Constituent Assembly in Free India accepted tribal problems, which came which became an integral part of the development of the people as a whole. The administrative policies of tribal integration was adopted. Different articles like 15, 16, 17, 19, Article 23, Article 25, Article 29, Article 35, 46, 244, 275, 330, 332, 334, 335, etc. And fifth and sixth schedules of the Constitution of India provides constitutional safeguards and welfare measures for the tribals and other marginalized community of the country. In addition to these legislative policies, the government at central and state have also adopted protective measures. Under these protective measures, non-tribal have been banned to penetrate in tribal areas without prior permission of the government. India, after independence, has taken the policy of integration of tribals, but certain precautions have to be taken in integrating the tribal societies into mainstream. The entire development approach of the tribals is based mainly on the principle of Panchsheel given by the first Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru with the help of Professor Varial Erwin, who was the National Tribal advisor at that time. In addition to that, number of other acts and programs were introduced among the tribes to solve their problems of land alienation, their poor rate of literacy and education, their employment in government jobs, their problem of indebtedness, their problem of health and sanitation. Certain tribes were listed as scheduled tribes and special facilities were to be provided by the government for their upliftment and education. There are different approaches taken up by these studies, but the most important strategies may be as follows. The tribal areas should have a formal credit institutions. The development program should be properly targeted to reach the needy. Integrated approach of development must be adopted by focusing on the important indicators of development such as education, health, nutrition, sanitation, and skill development. Financial literacy must be propagated and banking facilities must be introduced with right earnest. Diversifying farming activities to animal husbandry, poultry, fishing, and dairy farming may be promoted. Steps should also be taken to empower the women, tribal women, by skill training, education, handicraft, financial training, so that they can be part of the development process. Under the promotive and welfare policy of tribal development, the central and state government have started many programs after the independence, such as modified area development approach, tribal development blocks, introduction of integrated rural development programs IRDP, rural landless employment grantee program, large scale agriculture multipurpose societies LAMPs, community development programs, small farmers development agencies, marginal farmer and agriculture level development agencies, drought prone area programs DPAP, and training of rural youth for self employment. These are the main development programs which were introduced by different government after independence. The post independent period has shown a dynamic shift in tribal society. The increase in use of agriculture labor, shift in mode of payment from kind to cash, and presence of free wage laborers were evident in these tribal areas. Besides this, the commercialization of agriculture has also brought about a capitalistic mode of production to this sector. The tribals men were used as a mere means of production, and their share in the production is very less. As farm sector growth took place, the tribal society was integrated to the market economy. The flow of capital led to diversification of business and employment opportunities. The transformation of tribal society began during colonial period, but it gained momentum during post-independence period due to intervention of government policies, development of irrigation, rural infrastructure, input, fertilizers, formal credit mechanism through banks and cooperatives for agricultural growth prompted these changes. The development programs and schemes introduced by the government in different parts of the country were initially not accepted by all the tribals. In the study of uh, Padahiyas of Jharkhand, it was found that most of the tribal communities who were provided the housing colonies in 70s were not used by these tribal communities. But in a re-study of this community in the year 2002, it was found that these tribal people were again given housing facilities in the name of Birsa Munda Awas Yojana, and most of them have started using these houses. So the changes in their perception has also taken place, but they are not much aware about the development schemes introduced by the government. So these policies not only transform the travels economy but also travels social system. The transformation of travels economy but also travel social system. The transformation of travel society was regionally imbalanced and varied across India. So students, let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. As discussed, the travels have come a long way since their independence of India. Their situation has been changing with the facilities available to them. Their situation is improving to some extent. The travel culture of India has undergone changes owing to several factors such as impact of education introduced by the missionaries or government, development of various communication. Nevertheless, greatest impact has been that of industrialization and urbanization. Over the years, travel development administrations has also seen changes in approaches such as policy of isolation and later on policy of integration. There are different approaches to the travel development, and uh, these are like the government approach and approach for travel development in terms of their integration into the mainstream society, and later on after the independence, the constitution of independent India has listed these tribes as scheduled tribe and made several provisions under different articles. The successive government after the independence has also taken certain measures and introduced a lot of development programs and schemes for the betterment of tribals, but still a lot of initiatives needs to be taken because most of the tribals are still isolated and they have not joined the mainstream development of the country. They still believe in separatist movement, and some of the parts of the country, especially Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Odisha, has seen the tribals joining Naxal activities as well. So the government has need to be very cautious to assimilate them, these tribals living in these states, into mainstream society.